In 2014, a desperate young woman stood on a bankrupt, dying patch of dirt. When she dumped 500 chickens into a pasture with 50 angry cows, her neighbors laughed. They called her crazy. They tried to shut her down. 10 years later, those same men are begging for her secret. The ink on the ledger was red. It had been red for 6 years before Thomas Jenkins finally died of a massive coronary behind the wheel of a rusted 1998 John Deere tractor. When his daughter Anna left her mid-level accounting job in Chicago to return to Mercer County, Pennsylvania, she didn't just inherit 250 acres of rolling hills. She inherited $412,000 in bank debt, a herd of 50 sickly Angus cattle and soil so depleted it felt like walking on concrete. Anna sat at the battered oak kitchen table, staring at a notice of foreclosure from First National. Her father had played the conventional farming game exactly as the chemical companies and the government extension agents had told him to. He bought the synthetic fertilizers. He sprayed the herbicides. He took out loans to buy bigger machinery, to yield more corn to feed cows that were never meant to eat corn in the first place. And it had killed him. The land itself was practically dead. Walking out to the north pasture that afternoon, Anna kicked at the dirt. A cloud of brown dust plumed into the stagnant August air. There were no earthworms, there was no moisture, just cracked yellowing fescue grass and cattle standing shoulder to shoulder under the shade of a lone oak tree, swishing their tails frantically to fight off swarms of horn flies. The cows were losing weight, their coats dull and rough. "You're in over your head, Anna," a booming voice echoed over the barbed wire fence. It was Bill Rutherford. Bill owned the neighboring property, a sprawling 3,000-acre industrial soy and cattle operation. He drove a pristine Ford F250 and wore perfectly pressed denim. Bill had been trying to buy Cedar Ridge Farm from Anna's father for a decade, always at pennies on the dollar. "I'm managing Bill," Anna said, wiping a streak of sweat and dirt from her forehead. "The bank says otherwise." Bill chuckled, leaning against the fence post. It was a small town. There were no financial secrets. "Look, I'll give you $800 an acre. It's more than the dirt is worth. You take the money, pay off Greg Halpert down at First National, and go back to the city. This land is sour. It takes a real farmer to fix sour land, and frankly, sweetheart, you don't have the capital or the grit." The condescension in his voice made Anna's blood run cold. She looked at her father's cattle, then down at the cracked earth. "Cedar Ridge isn't for sale, Bill." Bill tipped his cap, a smirk playing on his lips. "Suit yourself. I'll buy it at the courthouse steps in 6 months anyway." That night, Anna couldn't sleep. She had exactly $14,000 left in her personal savings and a single credit card with a $10,000 limit. If she bought the chemical fertilizers and medications required to keep the herd alive through the winter, she would be completely broke by November. The conventional model was a trap. Desperate, she began scouring the internet. She bypassed the standard agricultural university sites and fell down a rabbit hole of obscure regenerative farming forums. She read about ancient agricultural practices, symbiotic ecosystems, and men in Virginia and Australia who were completely defying modern science. Then she stumbled upon a simple radical concept: nature doesn't do monocultures. In the wild herds of herbivores like bison would move across the plains eating grass and leaving behind massive amounts of manure. But they never stayed in one place long enough to destroy the grass. And more importantly, they were always followed by flocks of birds. The birds would scratch through the manure, eating the fly larvae, and parasites spreading the fertilizer into the soil and leaving behind their own nitrogen-rich droppings. Anna looked out her kitchen window at the moonlit pasture. Her father had kept the cows in the same field for months at a time. The manure just sat there, breeding flies, burning the grass and washing away into the creek when it rained. A crazy idea began to take root in her mind. It was a massive gamble. If it failed, she would lose the farm, her savings, and her father's legacy. But if she did nothing, she was guaranteed to lose it anyway. The next morning, Anna drove into town. She didn't buy chemical fertilizer. She didn't buy fly tags or synthetic dewormers for the cattle. Instead, she maxed out her final credit card and placed an order that would turn her into the laughingstock of Mercer County, 500 Rhode Island red and barred rock chicks, and 2 miles of portable electric fencing. The chicks arrived in early September, a deafening chorus of peeping cardboard boxes at the local post office. Postmaster Jerry Miller just shook his head as Anna loaded them into the back of her father's beat-up pickup truck. For the next 3 weeks, Anna worked like a woman possessed. Using scrap wood corrugated tin from a collapsed barn and the chassis of an old hay wagon, she built a massive mobile chicken coop. She called it the Egg-mobile. It was ugly lopsided and entirely functional. The strategy was simple, but labor-intensive. Every single morning at 6 a.m., Anna would string up a temporary electric paddock. She moved the 50 Angus cows into a tight, fresh patch of grass. The cows would graze aggressively, trample the weeds and drop their manure. Then Anna would move them again. Exactly 3 days later, Anna would hook the tractor to the Egg-mobile and tow the 500 teenage chickens into the exact paddock the cows had just vacated. The timing was biologically crucial. It takes about 3 to 4 days for fly eggs laid in cow manure to hatch into juicy larvae. When Anna opened the doors of the Egg-mobile, a feathered tsunami poured out onto the pasture. The chickens went wild. They aggressively scratched apart the cow patties, searching for the protein-rich maggots. In doing so, they leveled the manure, incorporating it directly into the soil. They ate the parasites that were making the cows sick, and they left behind thousands of pounds of highly potent nitrogen-rich chicken manure. But to the outside world, Anna had lost her mind. At Dottie's diner, the morning coffee crowd made her a daily punchline. "Did you hear about the Jenkins girl?" Bill Rutherford laughed loudly, stirring his black coffee. "She's out there pulling a scrap metal circus wagon with a tractor, letting chickens play in cow crap. She thinks the birds are going to save her farm. I drove by yesterday," chimed in Tom Willis, another conventional farmer. "She's moving fences every single day. Manual labor. For 50 head of cattle, it's pathetic. The whole place is going to collapse by Thanksgiving." The gossip stung, but Anna didn't have time to care. Her muscles ached, her hands were blistered, and the initial weeks were absolute chaos. One evening, she forgot to turn on the solar charger for the chicken netting. A pack of coyotes broke through, massacring 30 birds before Anna ran out in her pajamas with a shotgun firing into the dark. She sat in the wet grass, surrounded by dead chickens, weeping from pure exhaustion. She was entirely alone. But by week 6, something miraculous began to happen. The horn flies that had tormented her cattle almost entirely vanished. The chickens had broken the parasite life cycle. The cows stopped expending energy fighting pests and started putting on weight. Their coats began to shine with a healthy, oily luster. Even more staggering was the dirt. Where the chickens had passed, the cracked yellow earth was transforming. Heavy autumn rains came, and instead of washing over the compacted dirt into the creek, the water soaked in. The chickens' scratching had aerated the topsoil. A deep, vibrant, emerald-green swath of grass began to erupt across the north pasture, following the exact path of the Egg-mobile. It was undeniable. Anna was building topsoil. She was healing the land without a single drop of synthetic chemicals. Word of the bizarre green streak on Cedar Ridge Farm began to spread. Bill Rutherford drove his truck slowly down the county road one afternoon, staring at the lush pasture. He didn't see a miracle. He saw a threat. If Anna succeeded, he wouldn't get her land. Worse, if her zero-chemical method worked, it challenged everything Bill's heavily indebted chemical-reliant empire stood on. 2 days later, Anna was attaching a water line to the Eggmobile when a white county vehicle pulled up her gravel driveway. Out stepped Dave Reynolds, the county zoning commissioner, flanked by an officer from the Department of Agriculture. Anna Jenkins. Dave asked, his face a mask of bureaucratic indifference. He held a clipboard tight to his chest. "Yes. Can I help you, Dave?" Anna asked, wiping grease on her jeans. "We received an anonymous complaint about unsafe agricultural practices," Dave said, looking disdainfully at the chickens roaming behind the cows, specifically the unhygienic commingling of poultry and bovine livestock. Under a 1974 county ordinance regarding commercial biosecurity, you cannot graze avian species in the same containment area as ruminants without specialized concrete runoff pads. Anna stared at him, stunned. "Dave, they aren't confined. They're on pasture. This is how nature works. The birds sanitize the pasture." "That's not what the code says," Dave replied coldly, ripping a yellow sheet from his clipboard and handing it to her. "This is a cease and desist order. You have 48 hours to separate these animals and remove the mobile structures from the field, or the county will impound the livestock and fine you $1,000 for every day you're in violation." Anna looked down at the yellow paper. The fine would bankrupt her instantly. She looked up at the road, and parked a quarter-mile away, on the shoulder was a pristine Ford F250. Bill Rutherford was watching. The trap had been sprung, and Anna was out of moves. Anna stood in the gravel driveway, the yellow cease-and-desist order fluttering in the autumn breeze. Down the road, Bill Rutherford's white Ford F25 idled for a moment longer before slowly rolling away, a silent detonation of war. She had 48 hours. If she didn't separate the chickens from the cows, the county would impound her animals and levy fines that would instantly bankrupt Cedar Ridge Farm. That night, sitting at the same battered oak table where her father used to agonize over his debts, Anna finally broke down. She wept into her calloused hands. The system wasn't just rigged against small farmers, it actively punished anyone who dared to step out of line. But as the morning sun breached the horizon, casting a golden light over her vibrant, recovering north pasture, the despair morphed into a quiet, simmering rage. Anna was not going to lose her father's land to a corrupt county ordinance and a greedy neighbor. At 8 a.m., Anna walked into the dusty, wood-paneled office of Arthur Pendleton, an aging real estate attorney who had been a lifelong friend of her father. Arthur adjusted his thick glasses, reading over the citation. "It's a vintage piece of legislation." Arthur sighed, leaning back in his leather chair. "Passed in 74, after a bad bout of avian flu hit some factory farms. It was designed to keep massive poultry houses from dumping untreated waste into cattle feedlots. Bill Rutherford sits on the Agricultural Advisory Board. He knows exactly what he's doing by weaponizing this against you. Legally, you're in a tight spot. You don't have the capital to fight an injunction. I don't have a feedlot, Arthur," Anna said, her voice steady. "I have a pasture. The animals are moving constantly. They aren't confined in a biohazard zone. They are healing the ecosystem. There has to be a distinction in the law." Arthur rubbed his chin. "The law is blind to your grass, Anna. But it does rely on definitions. The ordinance specifically targets stationary commercial feed operations. We might have a loophole, but it'll require a public hearing to challenge the zoning commissioner's interpretation. And until then, you have to comply. or they'll take your livestock." Anna swallowed hard. For the next 3 weeks, she had to lock the chickens in the old hay barn. Without the birds sanitizing the fields, the flies returned. The cow manure sat untouched, burning the grass. The farm's recovery stalled almost instantly. It was a heartbreaking regression, but Anna used the time to prepare for war. She realized that arguing with bureaucrats in a closed room was a losing battle. She needed leverage. She needed the public. Anna bought a cheap tripod and attached her smartphone. She walked out to the fence line dividing Cedar Ridge from Bill Rutherford's mega farm. On Bill's side, the ground was bare, dusty, and sprayed to death with chemicals. The runoff from a recent rain had carved deep, muddy gullies into the dirt. On Anna's side, where the chickens had grazed the grass, was a thick, spongy, dark emerald green. The soil held the water perfectly. She recorded a 10-minute video explaining exactly what she was doing. She talked about the broken agricultural system, her father's bankruptcy, the healing power of rotational grazing, and the county's attempt to shut her down using a 50-year-old law meant for factory farms. She didn't hold back naming the zoning commissioner and the advisory board's blatant conflict of interest. She posted the video to a regenerative agriculture forum and a local community page. When Anna woke up the next morning, her phone was frozen. The video hadn't just reached Mercer County, it had exploded. It had amassed 400,000 views overnight. Comments poured in from farmers in New Zealand, soil scientists in California, and furious consumers in Pittsburgh. By the end of the week, the video had crossed 3 million views. A local news station parked a van at the end of her driveway. The Mercer County Zoning Board was completely unprepared for the firestorm. The phone lines at the courthouse rang incessantly. When the night of Anna's public hearing arrived, the small municipal building was packed to the fire code limit. News cameras lined the back wall. Bill Rutherford sat in the front row, his usual smirk replaced by a tight, nervous scowl. Dave Reynolds, the zoning commissioner, looked like a man walking to the gallows as he took the microphone to defend his citation, citing unproven health hazards and rogue farming methods. When it was Anna's turn to speak, she didn't walk up to the podium alone. She was accompanied by Dr. Harrison Gable, a leading agronomist and soil microbiologist from Penn State University, whom Arthur Pendleton had contacted after the video went viral. "The county claims my farm is a biohazard," Anna spoke into the microphone, her voice echoing through the silent, crowded room. "But nature doesn't agree." She handed the floor to Dr. Gable. He didn't use legal jargon. He used undeniable science. He presented lab results taken from Anna's soil and Bill Rutherford's soil just 2 days prior. Miss Jenkins' rotational model is not a health risk. It is a profound biosecurity asset, Dr. Gable stated firmly, pointing to a projector screen displaying the data. The chickens are actively breaking the pathogen cycle in the pasture. Her soil organic matter has increased by a full percentage point in a matter of months, a feat that conventionally takes decades. Meanwhile, the neighboring conventional farm shows severe compaction and dangerous levels of chemical runoff entering the county watershed. If this board is genuinely concerned about public health, you are citing the wrong farmer. The crowd erupted in applause. The board members exchanged panicked glances. Arthur Pendleton then delivered the killing blow. He formally submitted that Cedar Ridge Farm didn't meet the legal definition of a stationary commercial feed operation under the 1974 ordinance, rendering the cease and desist order fundamentally invalid. Faced with overwhelming public pressure, undeniable scientific backing, and a legal technicality they couldn't beat, the chairman of the board banged his gavel. The citation was dismissed. Anna had won. As she walked down the center aisle of the municipal building, farmers who had mocked her at the diner a month ago avoided her gaze. Bill Rutherford stormed out a side door, his face flushed red with fury. The battle was over, but the true test of her farm was just beginning. The victory at the courthouse was a catalyst, but it was not the finish line. The very next morning, before the frost had even burned off the grass, Anna hitched her battered tractor to the eggmobile and towed it right back into the center of the north pasture. The ecosystem of Cedar Ridge Farm, momentarily paused by bureaucratic red tape, roared back to life with a vengeance. With her newfound viral fame came a completely unexpected byproduct, unprecedented, overwhelming customer demand. Anna's email inbox and farm voicemail were flooded with thousands of messages from people wanting to buy her meat and eggs. She realized she no longer had to play the rigged game of commodity markets that had kept her father trapped in a suffocating cycle of debt. She didn't have to load her cattle onto crowded trailers to be sold to massive packing plants for pennies on the pound. Instead, she established Cedar Ridge Direct. She partnered with a local independent family-owned butcher shop that had been struggling to compete with corporate slaughterhouses. Together they started processing and selling premium grass-finished beef and pastured poultry directly to consumers' high-end restaurants and specialty grocers in Chicago and Pittsburgh. Her eggs alone became a culinary phenomenon. Because her chickens were constantly foraging on diverse, sanitized pasture and eating an insect-rich natural diet, their yolks were not the pale, watery yellow of conventional grocery store eggs. They were a thick, vibrant sunset orange, standing up tall in the pan, packed with omega-3 fatty acids and deeply complex flavors. Executive chefs from top-tier restaurants were suddenly fighting for a spot on her waiting list, willing to pay massive premiums for a product that elevated their menus. Within 2 grueling but wildly profitable years, Anna sat at her father's old oak table and wrote a final check to First National Bank. She had completely paid off the staggering $412,000 debt. For the first time in 3 generations, Cedar Ridge Farm was entirely free and clear. She reinvested the profits not in massive combine harvesters or expensive chemical fertilizers, but in infrastructure that supported life miles of high-tensile portable fencing, heavy-duty above-ground water lines, and more livestock. She added a flock of Catadine sheep to graze the broadleaf weeds the cows left behind. She introduced heritage breed Tamworth pigs into the wooded areas of the property to clear out the choking underbrush and turn over the forest floor. Cedar Ridge became a complex, multi-species, synchronized ballet of rotational grazing. Every animal had a purpose. Every animal moved. Then came the brutal, unforgiving summer of 2018. It was a historic drought that would break the back of conventional agriculture in the region. From early June until late August, not a single measurable drop of rain fell on Mercer County. The sun beat down mercilessly, with daily temperatures consistently hovering in the upper 90s. The county's agricultural sector went into an absolute state of emergency. This was the ultimate test of Anna's methods. Over the barbed wire fence line, Bill Rutherford's industrial empire was violently crumbling, because his dirt had been heavily tilled, sprayed with glyphosate, and stripped of all organic matter. For decades, it had zero biological ability to retain moisture. It baked in the sun, turning into a hard, cracked concrete. His shallow-rooted monoculture fescue grasses died off entirely by mid-July, leaving a landscape of blowing brown dust. With no pasture left, Bill was forced to buy hay, just to keep his thousands of cattle from starving. But the drought was widespread, and the regional supply of forage vanished. The price of hay skyrocketed to an astronomical $100 a bale. Semi-trucks rolled up Bill's driveway daily, delivering feed he couldn't afford. He was bleeding tens of thousands of dollars a week. The massive variable rate loans he had taken out to buy his pristine air-conditioned equipment and chemical inputs began to suffocate him. But on Anna's side of the fence, a miracle of biology was on full defiant display. Because she had spent the last 4 years painstakingly building topsoil, using the synchronized impact of her chickens and cows, her land acted like a massive subterranean sponge. For every 1% increase in soil organic matter, a single acre of land can hold an additional 20,000 gallons of water. Anna's soil was teeming with life, mycorrhizal fungi networks, earthworms and dung beetles, creating a deep, porous structure that had captured and stored the heavy spring rains deep underground. While the rest of the county turned brown and died, Cedar Ridge remained a shocking, vibrant oasis of emerald green. Her deep-rooted native grasses continued to photosynthesize, pulling stored moisture from feet below the surface. Her cows grazed contentedly in the shade of the oaks, chewing their cud. She didn't have to buy a single bale of emergency hay. The visual contrast at the property line was impossible to ignore. It looked like a photograph, spliced down the middle death on the right, abundant life on the left. Local farmers would slowly drive their pickup trucks past the boundary, dividing Anna and Bill parking on the shoulder to stare in quiet disbelief. The laughing at Dottie's diner had completely stopped. By the fall of 2019, the merciless financial math finally caught up with the conventional model. Bill Rutherford, the man who had mocked Anna, the man who had tried to steal her family's legacy for pennies, defaulted on his massive commercial loans. The very bank that had once threatened Anna now foreclosed on Bill's 3,000-acre operation. It was a bitterly cold, crisp November morning when the public auction was held on the stone steps of the Mercer County Courthouse. The crowd of locals was somber breath pluming in the freezing air. As the auctioneer began his rapid-fire chant, taking bids for the first 500-acre parcel of Bill's ruined, depleted land, a clear, confident voice rang out from the back of the crowd. 500,000, Anna said. Bill Rutherford, standing near the auctioneer's block, looked up his face, pale, gaunt, and utterly defeated. He watched in stunning silence as the young woman he had once told to go back to the city successfully purchased the very land he had destroyed. Anna didn't buy it out of spite or arrogance. She bought it because she knew she could heal it. She knew exactly how to bring that dead dirt back to life. 10 years after Anna first unleashed those chicks onto her dying pasture, Cedar Ridge Farm is unrecognizable. Today it is a booming, multi-million-dollar regenerative enterprise shipping nutrient-dense food across the country and employing dozens of locals. But perhaps the greatest twist of fate isn't the financial success, the zero-debt balance sheet, or the environmental restoration. It's the people who slowly pull their trucks up her long gravel driveway today. Every first Saturday of the month, Anna hosts a pasture walk and educational seminar. She stands out in the lush, thigh-high grass, holding a portable microphone, explaining the mechanics of carbon sequestration, daily rotational grazing, and biological pest control. The crowd listening to her isn't just made up of eager young city folks or internet activists. It is made up of older men in faded denim and scuffed work boots, men like Tom Willis. They stand quietly, holding notepads, taking furious notes. They raise their hands to ask highly technical questions about fencing logistics, water distribution, and livestock stocking densities. They are the conventional farmers of Mercer County, the very same men who used to sit over black coffee and laugh at the crazy Jenkins girl pulling a scrap metal chicken wagon. Now they don't laugh. They copy her. They are cancelling their chemical contracts, selling off their heavy tilling machinery, and buying miles of portable electric wire. They have finally realized what Anna figured out a decade ago, when she bet her last dime on 500 birds You cannot fight nature and win. But if you humbly work alongside her, she will provide a harvest far more abundant than you could ever imagine. If Anna's incredible journey from a mocked, bankrupt farmer to an agricultural pioneer inspired you, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs a reminder to never give up. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into the real-life stories of people who changed the world against all odds. Have you ever taken a risk everyone laughed at? Let us know in the comments below.